The rain drummed against the tin roof of the small cottage as Elena wiped her weathered hands on her apron. At 62, her face carried the lines of countless sleepless nights and back-breaking days. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, her heart was lighter than it had been in years. Her two sons, Marcus and Gabriel, were finally coming home. Not for a brief visit like the holidays past, but to take her with them to Lagos after decades of struggle, after years of watching other mothers leave for comfortable city homes while she remained behind. Her time had come. Elena had raised the boys alone since tuberculosis claimed her husband 15 years earlier. Those early years after his death felt like walking through quicksand. Every morning brought the same crushing weight of responsibility. How would she feed them? How would she pay their school fees? How would she keep them clothed and healthy when her own stomach often went empty? She sold groundnuts by the roadside, her voice growing hoarse as she called out to passing vehicles. She washed clothes for wealthier families, her hands cracking from the harsh soap and endless scrubbing. When harvest season came, she worked in the yam fields from dawn to dusk, her back screaming in protest as she bent over the red earth. But it was all worth it. Every blister, every hungry night, every moment of doubt had led to this. Marcus had called her 3 days ago, his voice bright with excitement through the crackling phone line. "Mama, pack your things. We are coming for you this Saturday. Gabriel and I have bought a house in Victoria Island. You will never have to work another day in your life." The memory of those words still made her chest tight with emotion. She had dropped the phone and wept right there in the village communication center, not caring who saw her tears. Now, as Friday evening settled over the village of Ogbomoso, Elena moved through her small home with purpose. She folded her best wrapper, the blue one with golden threads that she had saved for special occasions. She gathered her few treasured possessions: the wooden cross her husband had carved, a faded photograph of their wedding day, and the small Bible that had sustained her through the darkest times. Tomorrow would change everything. No more walking 3 kilometers to fetch water. No more worrying about where the next meal would come from. No more watching her neighbors whisper about the widow who struggled to make ends meet. But first, there was something she needed to do. Someone she needed to tell. Elena wrapped her headscarf tightly against the evening breeze and stepped out into the muddy streets. The village was settling into its nightly rhythm. Kerosene lamps flickered in windows, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Children's voices echoed from courtyards, where families gathered for their evening meals. She walked purposefully toward the other end of the village, where her older sister Victoria lived in a house slightly larger than her own. It had been months since they had spoken properly. Victoria was known throughout Ogbomoso for her sharp tongue and bitter complaints. Nothing was ever good enough for her. The weather was too hot or too cold. The young people were disrespectful. The government was corrupt. Life was unfair. But Elena believed in doing what was right, regardless of how others treated her. Victoria was family, and family deserved to know about important news. The wooden gate creaked as Elena pushed it open. Victoria appeared at her doorway, surprise flickering across her weathered features. She was 3 years older than Elena, but looked decades beyond her age. Years of resentment had carved deep furrows around her mouth and eyes. "Elena, what brings you here so late? I hope there is no trouble." Elena smiled, her first genuine smile in weeks. "No trouble, sister. I came to share good news." Victoria's eyebrows rose skeptically. In her experience, good news was rare in their village. "Good news? You have found money buried in your backyard?" Elena laughed softly. "Better than money. My sons are coming tomorrow to take me to Lagos. They have bought a house. They said I will live with them from now on." The silence stretched between them like a taut rope. Victoria's expression shifted from surprise to something harder to read. She did not smile. She did not offer congratulations. She simply stared. "They are taking you to the city? To live with them permanently?" Elena nodded eagerly. Yes, sister. After all these years of struggling, God has finally answered my prayers. I wanted you to know before we leave. We will stop here tomorrow morning to greet you properly. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. I see. And you did not think to discuss this with me earlier? I am your older sister. I should have been the first to know about such plans. Elena felt a small chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. I am telling you now, sister. That is why I came. How convenient. Victoria's voice carried an edge that Elena recognized but chose to ignore. You will go and enjoy the good life while I remain here in this forgotten place. Sister, please do not be like this. I only came to share my happiness with you. Victoria stepped back into her doorway. Safe journey tomorrow, Elena. May you find what you are looking for in the city. Elena reached out to embrace her sister, but Victoria had already begun closing her door. We will see you in the morning, sister. Rest well. As Elena walked back through the darkening village, she pushed away the uncomfortable feeling that had settled in her chest. Victoria had always been difficult. Jealousy was nothing new for her. Surely she would be happier in the morning when she saw Marcus and Gabriel again. Surely she would find it in her heart to be glad for her younger sister's good fortune. But Victoria was not thinking about happiness as she watched Elena's figure disappear into the shadows. She was thinking about 15 years of watching Elena struggle while she herself remained trapped in the same cycle of poverty and obscurity. She was thinking about how unfair it was that Elena's sons had prospered while her own children had moved away and rarely sent word. Most of all, she was thinking about how to make sure that Elena's happiness would not last long. The village settled into sleep around them, unaware that the morning would bring more than just a joyful reunion. Hidden in the darkness, resentment was taking root, preparing to bloom into something far more dangerous than simple jealousy. Tomorrow would indeed change everything, but not in the way Elena imagined. Victoria stood in the silence of her empty home, her hands trembling with something far beyond sisterly concern. The wooden walls seemed to press closer as Elena's words echoed in her mind. Lagos, Victoria Island, a house her nephews had bought with money she could never dream of possessing. She moved through her sitting room like a woman possessed, her bare feet making soft sounds against the concrete floor. The single kerosene lamp cast flickering shadows that danced with her growing agitation. Why should Elena enjoy such fortune when she, the elder sister, had suffered just as much? Perhaps more. Victoria's own children lived scattered across Nigeria. Her daughter worked as a housemaid in Kano, sending home barely enough to buy salt and oil. Her two sons had disappeared into the streets of Port Harcourt years ago, chasing dreams that never materialized into phone calls or money transfers. Yet Elena's boys had flourished, built businesses, bought houses. The injustice burned in her chest like swallowed fire. Around midnight, when even the night sounds of Ogbomoso had faded to whispers, Victoria wrapped her black headscarf around her shoulders and slipped out through her back door. The village paths were treacherous in darkness, but she knew every stone and pothole by heart. Her destination lay at the very edge of the settlement, where the forest began to reclaim the land. Baba Adewale's compound sat like a forgotten secret among the towering Iroko trees. Smoke curled from the chimney of his small hut, and the air carried the sharp scent of burning herbs and something darker. Victoria had never come here before, but everyone in 5 villages knew about the old man's reputation. He could heal broken bones and mend shattered hearts. He could also break both if the price was right. She knocked 3 times on the weathered wooden door, her heart hammering against her ribs. Who seeks wisdom in the house of shadows? The voice from within was gravelly, ancient. Victoria Okafor. I need your help, Baba. The door opened slowly, revealing a man whose age seemed to stretch back to the beginning of time. His face was painted with white chalk in intricate patterns, and his eyes held depths that made Victoria's courage waver. But desperation was stronger than fear. Enter, daughter of bitterness. Tell me what brings you to my threshold when decent people sleep." Victoria stepped into the dim interior. Clay pots lined the walls, filled with substances she dared not identify. Dried animals hung from the ceiling beams. The smell made her stomach turn, but she forced herself to speak. "My sister's sons are coming tomorrow to take her to Lagos. They are wealthy now, successful. She will leave me behind and forget I exist, just as she has forgotten how much I have helped her over the years." Baba Adewale settled onto a woven mat, his movements careful and deliberate. He studied Victoria's face in the lamplight, reading stories written in the lines around her eyes and mouth. "You speak of helping, but your heart carries the weight of envy. What is it you truly want, Victoria Okafor?" Victoria's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I want those boys to remember who truly deserves their loyalty. I want them to see their mother for who she really is, not the saint they believe her to be." The old man reached for a small gourd decorated with cowrie shells. He shook it gently, and the sound filled the hut like rainfall on dry leaves. "Hearts can be turned, daughter. Memories can be twisted. Love can become suspicion with the right encouragement. But such work requires ingredients that belong to those you wish to influence." Victoria leaned forward eagerly. "What kind of ingredients?" "Something they will consume willingly. Food prepared by hands they trust." His smile revealed teeth stained dark with kola nut and thyme. "Can you ensure they eat at your table tomorrow?" "Yes," Victoria said without hesitation. "Elena will bring them to greet me before they leave. I will prepare something special, something they cannot refuse." Baba Adewale disappeared into the shadows at the back of the hut. When he returned, he carried a small cloth pouch that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. The contents were fine as dust and black as a moonless night. "Mix this into their food. Let no grain touch your own lips or Elena's. Once consumed, their hearts will cool toward their mother. They will remember slights instead of sacrifices. They will see selfishness where they once saw love. The bonds of blood will weaken like old rope in rain." Victoria accepted the pouch with shaking hands. The powder felt warm against her palm, as if it contained living embers. "How long will it last?" she asked. The old man's laughter was like wind through dry bones. "Long enough for you to plant new truths in the garden of their minds. But remember this warning, Victoria Okafor. The medicine you give will demand payment. What you sow in darkness, you will reap in greater darkness. The harvest always exceeds the seed." Victoria barely heard the warning. Her mind was already racing ahead to tomorrow morning, to the moment when Marcus and Gabriel would sit at her table and consume her hospitality, along with something far more potent. She pressed payment into Baba Adewale's palm and hurried back through the sleeping village, clutching the pouch like a precious treasure. The night seemed to whisper encouragement as she walked, as if the very air approved of her plans. Back in her home, Victoria lit every lamp she owned and began preparing for the morning. She ground yam into flour, seasoned palm oil with the finest spices she could afford. She practiced the words she would speak, the subtle questions she would ask about Elena's past, the gentle suggestions that might take root in minds already softened by Baba Adewale's powder. By dawn, everything was ready. The food sat covered on her table, innocent and inviting. The black powder had disappeared without trace into the palm oil that would coat every bite. Victoria had rehearsed her performance until it felt like truth. She heard the rumble of an engine as the sun climbed higher. Through her window, she watched a gleaming SUV navigate the rutted village roads. Her heart raced as she recognized the two young men who stepped out, dressed in clothes that cost more than most villagers earned in a year. Marcus and Gabriel had returned to Ogbomoso, successful beyond their mother's wildest dreams. They had come to collect Elena and take her to a life of comfort and respect. They had no idea they were walking into a web spun from jealousy and ancient malice, or that their aunt's warm smile masked intentions darker than the powder now waiting in their food. The morning light seemed to grow dimmer as Victoria smoothed her best wrapper and prepared to welcome her nephews home. The morning arrived with the sound of children playing in distant courtyards and roosters announcing the new day. Victoria adjusted her headscarf one final time and stepped outside to wait. The black powder had done its work invisibly, mixed so thoroughly into the palm oil that not even she could detect its presence. Elena appeared first, walking quickly down the dusty path with a spring in her step that Victoria had not seen in years. Behind her came the gleaming SUV, moving carefully over the uneven ground. When it stopped, two tall young men emerged, and Victoria's breath caught in her throat. Marcus and Gabriel had transformed from the skinny village boys she remembered into confident city gentlemen. Marcus wore a crisp white shirt and dark trousers that probably cost more than Victoria spent on food in 3 months. Gabriel sported a gold watch that caught the sunlight as he embraced his mother. "Auntie Victoria," Marcus called out, his voice warm with genuine affection. "Look how long it has been." Victoria forced her most welcoming smile and opened her arms wide. "My sons, you have grown so big and handsome. Come inside. I have prepared something special for you." Elena beamed with pride as they walked toward Victoria's house. "Sister, can you believe how God has blessed me? My boys have done so well for themselves." "Indeed," Victoria replied, her voice carefully measured. "They are a credit to your efforts." Inside the sitting room, Victoria had arranged everything perfectly. The table gleamed with her best plates, filled with jollof rice, fried plantains, and pepper soup that filled the air with mouth-watering aromas. Fresh palm wine sat in clay cups, and the scent of perfectly seasoned meat made even Elena's stomach rumble despite her earlier breakfast. "Auntie, you should not have gone to all this trouble," Gabriel protested, but his eyes lit up at the familiar flavors of home. "Nonsense," Victoria waved dismissively. "When do I get to see my successful nephews? Sit, eat. There is plenty for everyone." Marcus and Gabriel settled at the table while Elena remained standing. Victoria quickly moved to serve the young men, ensuring their plates received generous portions of the oil-rich rice and stew. She made a show of preparing a plate for Elena, but managed to serve it from a different pot she had prepared without the powder. "The food smells incredible, Auntie," Marcus said, taking his first bite. "Just like when we were children." "Exactly like childhood," Victoria agreed, watching carefully as both brothers began eating with obvious pleasure. "You know, I remember when you were small boys, how difficult things were for your mother. So many nights she would come to me, crying about how hard it was to manage everything alone." Elena shifted uncomfortably. "Sister, those days are long past." Of course," Victoria continued, her tone light and conversational. "But you boys should know how much your aunt helped during those difficult times. When your mother could not afford your school fees, who do you think provided the money?" Gabriel paused mid-bite, looking between his mother and aunt with confusion. "Mama never mentioned. Your mother has always been proud," Victoria said gently, refilling their palm wine cups, perhaps too proud to admit when she needed help. "Even when she was sick that terrible year with malaria, she refused to let me take care of you boys properly. I had to insist." Elena's face flushed. "Victoria, what are you saying? That is not how I remember." "Memory can be unreliable," Victoria replied smoothly, noting with satisfaction that both young men were eating steadily. The powder would need time to work, but she could already see small changes in their expressions. Marcus's face had grown slightly cooler, while Gabriel seemed to be studying his mother with new eyes. "Tell me about your business ventures," Victoria continued, skillfully steering the conversation. "It must have taken enormous sacrifice to build such success." "We worked day and night for years," Marcus replied, his voice carrying a slight edge that had not been there moments before. "No one helped us. We built everything from nothing." "From nothing?" Victoria echoed meaningfully, but surely your mother's guidance and support. Mama did what she could, Gabriel said slowly. But we had to figure out most things ourselves. Sometimes it felt like we were completely alone in the world. Elena stared at her sons in shock. How can you say that? I gave you everything I had. I went without food so you could eat. I worked until my hands bled so you could go to school. Of course you did your best, Marcus said, but his tone had grown distant. Though I do remember many times when we needed you and you were too busy with your own concerns. Victoria hid her smile behind her palm wine cup. The powder was working faster than she had dared hope. More rice, my sons? You are too thin. Your mother should have been feeding you better all these years. As the morning progressed, Victoria continued her careful work. She spoke of Elena's supposed shortcomings with the skill of a master storyteller, weaving truth and fiction together so seamlessly that even she began to believe her own words. She reminded the brothers of childhood disappointments, reframing their mother's sacrifices as selfishness and her struggles as neglect. With each bite of the tainted food, Marcus and Gabriel's faces grew harder. Their mother, who had seemed like a saint just hours before, began to appear in their minds as someone who had failed them in countless small ways. The powder worked like acid on their memories, dissolving the golden glow of childhood recollections and replacing it with shadows of doubt. You know, Victoria said as she served fresh fruit, I always wondered why your mother never remarried after your father died. A woman alone, raising 2 boys. It must have been selfish to deny you a proper father figure. That is enough, Elena said sharply, rising from her chair. Victoria, I do not know what game you are playing, but I will not sit here and listen to you poison my sons' minds with lies. Marcus looked at his mother with eyes that seemed to belong to a stranger. Lies, Mama? Or truths you never wanted us to know? What truths? Elena's voice cracked with pain and confusion. Gabriel set down his spoon and leaned back in his chair. The truth about how you kept us away from Auntie Victoria when we needed family support. The truth about how you made us believe we only had each other when we could have had so much more. I never, Elena began, but Marcus cut her off. We came here to take you to Lagos, but now I am wondering if that is really what you deserve. The words hit Elena like physical blows. She looked around the room desperately, seeing her sister's satisfied expression and her son's cold faces. Something terrible had happened here. Something she could not understand or fight. My sons, please, she whispered. I love you. Everything I did was for you. Love? Marcus stood up abruptly. Is that what you call abandoning us emotionally while you wallowed in your own self-pity? Victoria rose as well, placing a gentle hand on Marcus's arm. Do not be too harsh on your mother, nephew. She did what she thought was best, even if it was not always right. Elena stumbled backward, her heart breaking with each word from her children's mouths. These were not the sons who had called her 3 days ago with voices full of love and gratitude. These were strangers wearing her children's faces, speaking with her children's voices but expressing thoughts that belonged to someone else entirely. I think, Gabriel said quietly, that maybe Auntie Victoria needs our help more than you do, Mama. She has been alone all these years while you had us to care for you. Victoria's eyes gleamed with triumph, but she kept her voice humble. Oh no, I could never impose on you boys like that. It would not be imposing, Marcus said firmly. It would be justice. Elena felt the world tilting beneath her feet. Everything she had dreamed of, everything she had worked toward for 15 years, was crumbling like sand in her fingers. Her sons were slipping away from her, drawn by invisible chains toward the woman who had orchestrated this nightmare. Please, she said one final time, reaching toward Marcus with trembling hands. Please remember who I am. Remember who you are. But Marcus stepped away from her touch, as if it burned him. We remember perfectly, Mama. That is the problem. As the morning sun climbed higher over Ogbomoso, Elena realized that she was about to lose everything that mattered to her. Her sons were preparing to drive away, but they would not be taking her to Lagos. Instead, they would be taking Victoria, the sister who had just destroyed her life with a smile and a handful of poisoned rice. The sound of the SUV engine starting felt like the final nail in the coffin of Elena's dreams. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound Elena had ever endured. As the SUV pulled away from Victoria's compound, carrying her sons and her sister toward Lagos, Elena stood frozen in the dusty yard. The sound of the engine faded into the distance, but the echo of her children's cold words remained, hammering against her heart like nails into wood. Victoria had won. After years of watching Elena struggle and succeed, her older sister had finally found a way to claim victory. The powder, whatever dark magic Baba Adewale had provided, had worked with terrifying efficiency. In the span of a single morning, 15 years of maternal sacrifice had been erased from her son's memories, replaced with manufactured resentment and imagined neglect. Elena walked slowly back to her empty cottage, each step feeling like a journey through quicksand. The packed bags sat by her door, mocking reminders of dreams that would never come to pass. Her best wrapper, carefully folded, would never be worn in a Lagos sitting room. Her treasured photographs would never grace the walls of her son's house. The village continued its daily rhythm around her, oblivious to her devastation. Women carried water jugs on their heads. Children chased chickens through the dusty streets, and men gathered under the ancient baobab tree to discuss politics and weather. Life moved forward while Elena's world had stopped completely. She collapsed onto her narrow bed and wept until no more tears would come. The silence in her home felt suffocating, filled with the ghosts of her son's laughter from years past. Every corner held memories that now seemed tainted by Victoria's poisonous words. Had she really failed them so completely? Had her love truly been so inadequate? Days passed in a blur of hollow routine. Elena forced herself to eat, to sweep her compound, to maintain the basic functions of living. But inside, she felt as empty as a broken calabash. The few villagers who knew about her son's visit offered confused condolences, unable to understand why the reunion had ended in separation rather than celebration. "Sister Elena," called Mama Kemi, an elderly neighbor who sold palm oil at the market, "I heard your boys came to visit. When are you traveling to join them?" Elena's throat closed around the words. She managed only a weak smile and a vague gesture before hurrying back inside her cottage. The truth was too painful to speak, too shameful to admit. How could she explain that her own children had rejected her? How could she describe the look of disgust in Marcus's eyes, or the cold dismissal in Gabriel's voice? Meanwhile, in Lagos, Victoria reveled in her newfound luxury. The house on Victoria Island was everything she had dreamed of and more. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and the view from the living room window showed the glittering waters of the lagoon. Marcus and Gabriel treated her with the respect and affection she had always craved, calling her Mama and seeking her advice on business matters. But the powder's effects were not permanent, as Baba Adewale had warned. Like morning mist burned away by the rising sun, the artificial hatred began to fade from the brothers' hearts. It started with small moments of confusion, tiny gaps in their manufactured memories that didn't quite align with deeper truths. Gabriel woke one morning with tears on his cheeks, remnants of a dream where his mother held him during a childhood fever, singing soft lullabies until his temperature broke. The dream felt more real than his recent memories of her selfishness, and the contradiction troubled him deeply. Marcus found himself staring at an old photograph he kept in his wallet, one that showed him and his brother flanking their mother at his university graduation. Elena's face in the picture radiated pure joy and pride, her eyes bright with tears of happiness. This woman looked nothing like the neglectful, self-centered person Victoria had described. "Mama Victoria," Gabriel said one evening as they sat in the spacious living room, "can you tell me again about the time our mother refused to let you help us with school fees?" Victoria's smile faltered slightly. The brothers had been asking more questions lately, seeking details she struggled to provide. Well, you were very young. Perhaps you do not remember clearly. But I do remember her working 3 jobs that year, Marcus added slowly. I remember her hands being cracked and bleeding from washing clothes for other families. If she had money from you, why would she have suffered like that? Victoria's heart began to race. The powder was losing its grip, and she could see doubt creeping back into their eyes like dawn light through shuttered windows. Sometimes pride makes people do foolish things, she said quickly. Your mother was always too proud to accept help gracefully, but her explanations sounded hollow even to her own ears. The brothers exchanged glances that made Victoria's stomach churn with familiar dread. She had won this battle through deception and dark magic, but truth had a way of rising to the surface like oil on water. Back in Ogbomoso, Elena had begun visiting her husband's grave every evening. The small cemetery sat at the edge of the village, where tall grass whispered secrets to the wind. She would kneel beside the simple concrete headstone and speak to him as if he could hear her words. Peter, she whispered on this particular evening, I have lost our sons. Your sister has taken them from me, and I do not know how to get them back. They look at me now with strangers' eyes, as if all our years together meant nothing. The wind rustled through the nearby trees, carrying the scent of rain and the distant sound of children playing. Elena pressed her palms against the cool concrete and closed her eyes. If I truly failed them, if I was the selfish woman Victoria says I am, then I accept whatever punishment awaits me. But if I loved them well, if I gave them everything I had to give, then please find a way to bring them home. Let them remember who we were together. Let them see through the lies that have poisoned their hearts. As if in response to her prayer, the first drops of rain began to fall. Elena remained kneeling as the water soaked through her wrapper, washing the dust from her skin, but not the pain from her soul. She stayed until the storm passed, then walked home through the mud with something resembling peace in her heart. She had done all she could do. The rest belonged to God and time and the deeper truths that lived in her sons' hearts, buried but not destroyed by Victoria's cruel magic. In Lagos, the revelation came like lightning splitting the night sky. Gabriel was going through some old papers when he found a letter he had written to his mother years earlier, thanking her for sending money when his business was struggling. The letter spoke of her constant support and encouragement, of phone calls that lasted hours as she listened to his problems and offered gentle wisdom. None of this matched Victoria's version of events. None of this suggested a selfish, neglectful mother who had abandoned her children emotionally. Marcus, Gabriel called urgently. You need to see this. His brother read the letter twice, his face growing pale with each word. This cannot be right. Victoria told us. Victoria lied, Gabriel said quietly. The words hung in the air like an accusation, heavy with implications that made both men feel sick. They began searching through their belongings, finding more evidence of their mother's love and sacrifice. Bank statements showing money transfers when they were struggling students. Photographs of her beaming with pride at their achievements. Text messages filled with encouragement and unconditional support. The truth crashed over them like a wave, washing away the artificial resentment that had clouded their judgment. They remembered now, really remembered, how their mother had worked herself to exhaustion for their sake. How she had celebrated their victories and comforted their defeats. How she had never once made them feel like burdens, even when providing for them nearly broke her. What have we done? Marcus whispered, his hands shaking as he held a Mother's Day card they had given Elena years earlier. The inscription read, "To the best mother in the world, who sacrificed everything for us." Victoria appeared in the doorway, drawn by their urgent voices. One look at their faces told her that her deception had been discovered. The powder's effects had finally worn off completely, leaving her exposed and defenseless against their returning memories. You poisoned us, Gabriel said, his voice deadly quiet. You did something to our food that day. Something that made us forget who our mother really is. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She had prepared for many possibilities, but not for this moment of complete exposure. I only wanted, she began, but Marcus cut her off. You wanted to steal our love from the woman who earned it through 15 years of sacrifice. You wanted to destroy the most beautiful relationship we had because you were jealous. The brothers stood up together, their movements synchronized by shared purpose. Victoria backed against the wall, seeing in their faces an anger that made her blood run cold. Get out, Gabriel said simply. Pack your things and get out of our house. Go back to the village and pray that our mother can find it in her heart to forgive what you have done. Victoria tried to speak, to explain, to justify her actions, but the words died in her throat. She had overplayed her hand, pushed too hard, and now the backlash threatened to destroy her completely. Within an hour, she was sitting in a taxi heading back to Ogbomoso, clutching her small bag of belongings and watching Lagos disappear behind her. The luxury she had briefly tasted was gone, replaced by the bitter knowledge that she had lost not only her ill-gotten gains, but also any chance of genuine reconciliation with her sister. Meanwhile, Marcus and Gabriel were already planning their journey home. They would drive through the night if necessary, racing against time and their own shame to reach their mother before she could doubt their love any longer. As the sun set over Ogbomoso, Elena knelt once more beside her husband's grave. But this time, instead of speaking words of despair, she found herself offering quiet thanks for the small mercies that still remained in her life. She had her health, her faith, and memories of loving her sons that no amount of poison could truly destroy. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tonight, she would rest in the knowledge that love, real love, was stronger than any curse or charm. Truth had a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply it was buried. And somewhere on the highway between Lagos and Ogbomoso, two sons were racing home to the mother they should never have abandoned, carrying hearts full of remorse and love that burned brighter for having been nearly lost. The story was not over. In fact, it was just beginning.